This is the Dark Enlightenment with your host, MARKSSIUS Hill, aka House Hill, the 2-3 of MCs. Welcome to Enlightenment. Peace. What do you think the effects of the war on drugs, the war against black people, the flooding of our communities with crack cocaine, the war waged against us, how do you think that affected us as black, dark people that were really coming up? I meant melanated people.
I understand. I think we all know by now it was planned. Set in advance to break up the family structure, to disrupt the family structure as a whole, black man, black woman. And even fast forward today, we have this strong, independent black woman, and it's frowned upon, but in a sense being celebrated because it was set up to be that way. But you have to take your head off the occasion for there was such one.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
The CIA and law enforcement have supposedly been funneling drugs into the inner cities and to the African American community in particular as part of a covert effort to stop them attaining stability, building wealth, and achieving political power.
So to some very good extent, that's really what the war on drugs has been about. When people talk about it as the new Jim Crow, in this wonderful book by Michelle Alexander with that title, it's about understanding that, the war on drugs is not just about race, and it's not just about targeting black and brown young people, because God knows, millions of white people have been swept up in the war on drugs as well. But it is disproportionately and overwhelmingly about that.
During that epidemic, we lost a lot. We lost doctors, we lost lawyers, we lost engineers, we lost a lot of high-paying, high-value individuals. The nerds and the brilliant people in our diaspora were weeded out. And they just so happen to be the type of people that take chances, go out on a limb, go all out. Those are the type of people that drug attracted.
But in 1982, Democrats in Congress passed laws to cut off support for the Nicaraguan rebels. So the Contras and their CIA backers had to find new ways of funding their struggle. What they found was cocaine. In the early 80s, smokable cocaine, or crack, exploded across American cities. This proved to be a gold mine for countless organized crime groups, even those backed by the CIA. At this point, the CIA strongly denied that they were involved in the drug trade. But on the streets, the rumors began to spread that the government was either actively or passively allowing crack to be sold. These remained just rumors until 1996, when a reporter with the San Jose Mercury News named Gary Webb picked up the story from a new angle. Webb investigated the case of Freeway Rick Ross, who in the early 1980s was the most important kingpin in LA's crack scene, and probably America's first ever crack millionaire.
What's the most money you ever made in a day?
$3 million.
So they attracted our most brilliant, most outgoing, most daring individuals. And that ruined their lives. So you think about it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's the famous term they like to use. But they forgot about the war that they raged on us. After the war they raged on us. After the war that was raged about us. It's always a war with us.
You're the guy on top, and where do you get your coke from?
I was getting my coke from a guy by the name of Oscar Danilo Blandon, who also was my informant. He's a guy that set me up with the police. When I went to trial, we found out that he was what they call a Contra. The Contras was backed by the CIA, and it sparked this big investigation by this reporter called Gary Webb.
As a public elected officials, all of us must be concerned that our government could have anyway been involved in drug trafficking.
The reaction to the story was so intense that the CIA director took the unprecedented step of defending the agency at a heated LA community meeting.
It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. I will get to the bottom of it, and I will let you know the results of what I found.
How are we supposed to trust the CIA official to investigate themselves?
Instead of investigating the CIA, major papers like the LA Times, Washington Post, and New York Times all attacked Webb himself. Webb was eventually hounded from his job and found himself unable to work as a journalist. He died by suicide in 2004. But in 1998, the CIA's own Inspector General released a report essentially admitting that many elements of the Dark Alliance story were true.
So you had the CIA finally coming to the table and admitting that what we reported in the 80s and what Webb reported in the 90s was in fact true.
When traffickers linked to the Nicaraguan king of drugs, Norwin Menezes, were busted in San Francisco in 1983, the CIA even requested that tens of thousands of dollars, which had been seized, be returned to the drug traffickers.
The CIA admitted that they knew that these guys were selling drugs and had went to the Attorney General and asked the Attorney General could they not report it because the mission that they were trying to accomplish was so big. It was a matter of U.S., what do they call it?
National security?
National security.
You run into a problem when you isolate the crack epidemic from what's happening today. Anytime you separate history from current events, you can't get a full perspective on solutions, outcomes, anything, because the long-term view is essential. You have to be able to place all the events into perspective. So, the crack epidemic was devastating to us. I mean, absolutely devastating. And it was orchestrated by our government. Government officials, letters I won't even mention. They'll kill you.
Did the CIA work with and protect major drug traffickers? Yes, absolutely. They've been forced to admit that publicly. The real tragedy here is that as far as we know, no one from the CIA or the mainstream media even lost their jobs over this. The only people who suffered for it were the journalists who exposed the story and the millions of people targeted by the unjust and racist laws that were passed in response to the 1980s crack crisis.
We'd like to congratulate drugs for winning the war.
Oh, so now they have to say, it's sickness. They're sick. Send them to a clinic. Send them to rehab. No. Send them to prison like you did us during that crack epidemic when you dumped all of that in our communities.
Treatment wasn't the answer, but jail.
And the federal government's response to the war on drugs was clear. Lock them up and throw away the key.
Send them to prison. They stealing and robbing and killing for the drug, same way we did. Send them to prison. And it seems like you are. You don't care whether we're black or white. Nah, it's about that green. So, white people, get ready.
The crack era vilified Black and Latinx people, and that's a fact. During this period in time, there was no solution other than jail. No consideration for how trauma and poverty could lead one to get involved with crack. No treatment for those who suffered from addiction. No discussion of a public health crisis, and certainly no empathy.
Hey, Enlightenment family, I just want to ask you one thing. How many chemists do you think in the hood it took to make a batch of crack? How many chemical formulas do you think they memorized in school to make that batch of crack in the hood? We got some
hood chemist, mad talented enough to make a whole crack economy through their ingenuity. Y'all know damn well ain't no black people make no crack.
Despite the growing public feeling that the drug war has failed, Attorney General John Ashcroft has declared that he wants to escalate at point one. I want to renew it, he told CNN's Larry King. I want to refresh it, relaunch it if you will too, and Bush's nominees to fight the drug war have joined in Ashcroft's chorus. John Walters, the new drug czar, and Asa Hutchinson, the choice to head the Drug Enforcement Agency, DA, are promising ever more interdiction, incarceration, and arrests.
Educate yourself, dark people. If you don't think you have an enemy, at least know that you're under attack. And then look at where the attack's coming from. Enemy, right?
Rates of drug use are as high as they were when Nixon declared this so-called war in 1971. 45 years later, it's time to rethink our policies and laws. The war on drugs is an epic fail.
It's hard living in an enemy land. Seems like they always want to tear you down, kill you, hang you up, burn you, chop you, stick you, poke you, bury you, drag you. Man.
Ask the question, why are some drugs legal and others illegal? Why are cigarettes and alcohol legal and pharmaceuticals in the middle and these other drugs, marijuana, other ones illegal? Some people sort of inherently assume, well, this must be because there was a thoughtful consideration of the relative risks of drugs, and but then you think, well, that can't be, because we know alcohol is more associated with violence than almost any illegal drugs, and cigarettes are more addictive than any of the illegal drugs. I mean, heroin addicts routinely say it's harder to quit cigarettes than it is to quit heroin. So it's not as if there was ever any kind of National Academy of Science that 100 years ago decided that these drugs, these ones had to be illegal and those ones legal. And it's not as if this is in the Bible or in the Code of Hammurabi. I mean, nobody was making legal distinctions among many of these drugs back until the 20th century, essentially. So if you ask how and why this distinction got made, what you realize when you look at the history is it has almost nothing to do with the relative risks of these drugs, and almost everything to do with who used and who was perceived to use these drugs, right? So there's, back in the 1870s, when the majority of opiate consumers were middle-aged white women, throughout the country, using them for their aches and pains and for their, when the time of the month and menopause, and there was no aspirin, there was no penicillin, lots of diarrhea because of bad sanitation, and nothing stops you up like opiates. I mean, millions, many more, a much higher percentage of the population back then used opiates than now, but nobody thought about criminalizing it because nobody wanted to put, auntie or grandma behind bars, right? But then when the Chinese start coming to the country in large numbers in the 1870s and 80s and, working on the railroads and working in the mines and working in factories and and then going back home at the end of the night to smoke up a little opium the way they did in the old country, the same way white people were having a couple of whiskeys in the evening. And that's when you got the first opium prohibition laws in Nevada, in California, in the 1870s and 80s, directed at the Chinese minorities. It was all about the fear what would those Chinamen with their opium do to our precious women, addicting them and seducing them and turning them into sex slaves and all this sort of stuff. The first anti-cocaine laws were in the South in the early part of the 20th century, directed at black men working on the docks, and the fear, what would happen to those black men when they took that white powder up their black noses and forgot their proper place in society, going out. First time anybody ever said that, cops needed a 38 would not bring down a Negro crazed on cocaine, you needed a 45. I mean, the New York Times, the paper of record reporting this stuff as fact back in those days. That's when you got the first cocaine prohibition laws. The first marijuana prohibition laws were in the Midwest and the Southwest, directed at Mexican migrants, Mexican Americans, taking the good jobs from the good white people, going back home to their communities, smoking a little of that funny smoking, marijuana, reefer, cigarette. And once again, the fear, what would this minority do to our precious women and children? So, it's always been about that. Even alcohol prohibition was to some extent a broader conflict between the white Americans and the not so white Americans, right? The white Americans coming from Northern and Western Europe in the 18th, early 19th century with all of their stuff. And then the not so white Americans coming from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe in the late 19th and early 20th century, bringing with them their beer and their vino and their Schlivowitz, right? It was all about that type of conflict. And it wasn't as if the white Americans weren't also consuming. It's just many of them knew that when you criminalize a vice that is engaged in by a huge minority of the population, and you leave it inevitably to the discretion of law enforcement as to how to enforce those laws are not typically going to be enforced against the whiter and wealthier and more affluent or middle-class members of society.
It's almost like discovering everything that you were taught wasn't true. It's always like that. That's why we bring Dark Enlightenment.
It was set up to be that way. So even tearing down the family structure and incarcerating black males, black women progressed because they had to. They were single mothers. But now they're frowned upon and they're the bad guy. So it's always a wave effect, not just collateral damage up front, but, down the road as well. You have to take your hat off the occasion for doing such a wonderful thing.
Do you think that was a trick of the enemy making the black woman have to be in a position of so much strength and feeling like she has to carry the load, which in actuality, I don't believe that was the case. But I believe she chose the government assistance over the black man. But that's a whole nother story. What we're gonna focus on is the effects.
I would like to comment on it, sir.
I
would like to comment.
Okay,
first and foremost, it didn't take the government to structure the black woman as being strong, this and that. She was there anyway. She is. The black woman is all creativity. So let's get that out of the way. But I think their plan was like government subsidies and things of that nature. To further put us in like this project mind state. We'll give you, but we're gonna berate you and make it seem as if you're such a heavy hitter laying on the system. So this was set for us. This was planned for the community. So, yeah.
Do you think
food stamps,
the role that the government has played in black people's lives?
No light skins, they don't count up.
We're speaking of black people.
Negroes.
Light skinned Negroes are Negroes too. If you ain't white, you gonna know it. So that's not even up for that's not. The position they put the black man in as opposed to the black woman was the black woman actually was a more preferable choice for job things because you get a double dose of a minority. You got a woman and she's black, so she's more desirable in the job market. Therefore, they started getting more jobs, and they set it up that way, just like you said.
Many black men were incarcerated And
oh my God.
Okay, I mean, at that point, so many black men were incarcerated.
No doubt. I'm with you on
falling
that.
onto that thing of crack. But we can't make it seem like it's the black woman's fault for progressing and having to carry the burden of mother and father on her shoulders, man. I mean, it's not her fault that she finally gets what's due, and that's just a drop in the bucket. So why are we making everybody else the victim and her making her the bad?
Because the roles are mixed up. You know, you have a situation to where
nobody
women
put a crack pipe to all those thousands of brothers' lips. Nobody made them rob. Nobody made them sell crack. Nobody made them do that, bro. You chose that. So for every action, there's a reaction. So you know there's no pretty outcome of it. So you suffer the consequences the next.
Yeah, everyone suffers the consequences of what happened to us.
We're not looking at the black man who made such terrible decisions. You're pointing the blame at everyone else as opposed to just coming back to root analysis. The black man, you didn't have to.
No. In this situation with the crack epidemic, I'm saying that our government was our enemy. Our government still is our enemy. Our government still is our enemy. They still trying to kill us. Factions of the government are still trying to destroy us. So you have to recognize who your enemy. That's why I asked you earlier. Don't you think that was a trick of the enemy, making the black woman think she has to be so strong, mixing our roles up. Their roles in their community.
She had to.
Their roles in their community aren't mixed up. They know who's in charge. Donald Trump says, I grabbed the pussy. We still voting for him. We with him. Why? Because he's a white man. He's our leader.
Yes, he is your leader. But
so why can't black women be like that?
Like what? Grabbing each other by the pussy?
No, why can't they? Even though Donald Trump did that, he was caught on tape saying that, they still vote. They put the vote. White women voted for Donald Trump.
Bro, if 12 people vote, they already know who's going to be president.
I'm just saying though, they didn't abandon him just because he was a man. Because he was, he was being a man. He was locker room talking and whatever. But they didn't be like, man. They didn't castrate him like our women do.
We're using Trump.
That's just an example.
Well,
just think about Trump. Just think about Trump compared to Obama.
From a moral standard.
Just think about how much you think black people supported Obama. No, sir, they hate him. They talk bad about him all the time.
Bro, how many blacks have you heard talk good about somebody other than Beyonce or damn Jay-Z? I mean, bro, look, either you're conscious or you're not, but what did he do other than what he was plugged in to do? You get it? Look, bro, either you're on the good side or you're on the bad side. Take a pick what your standards, what going forward, what side you want to represent. You dig? Obama did, he was a freaking president. He can't fucking smoke blunts and eat good hot wings and work on his 3 all day. He got to run the country for what they tell him to do. He got to go and do it. So, but why are we initially blaming black women for where they are? And I think they're so far behind in comparison to where they're supposed to be, you know.
Well, I think a lot of that came from all the monkey wrenches they threw, which
who are they?
The government. It was like you said, it was a plan. We started with the Civil War. Then we had segregation afterwards. Then after we broke through that, they threw the crack in. So every time we seem like we making progress, here comes the monkey wrench. Before that, even back in the 20s, we got Black Wall Street. They burning it down. They lynching us. So, I mean, it's always a war.
You know there's a pattern here, aren't you? Everything we're trying to build,
it's always
they tear it down. So, through all the hoopla and this and scrams and marches and getting musty and rhetoric and hating each other, what is one thing we have not yet to do? You don't have to think far. What is one thing the marchers haven't done other than march? I'll narrow it for you.
I'm not going to say it on here because I want to remain on YouTube a little longer. But I know what my good brethren here is thinking.
What am I thinking?
Because he's a revolutionary thinker.
I just want to know, we've tried everything. And now
we don't need to try
that. The scripts have been flipped to where, not only do we know now that a vast majority of everything that has been taught to us is a lie.
Oh my God.
Now you're going to CRT, white, i.e. white history. You're going to, take it. I'm going to take your studies away. Your history is a lot, it's prevalent, it's the truth, but we're not going to bring the truth. We're going to stick to what we know here and now. Viva Revolution, man. So it's up to you. Good luck.
It's up to who? Wow, man.
That's great.
Hold on. Before we pause, let me say one thing. The war waged on us by Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton. Y'all should be ashamed of yourself, bro.
If you're president, you don't want to.
We don't care about none of your feelings or nothing like that. All we want is the truth. And the closer we get to the truth, the better our consciousness will be. The greater our spirit will grow. And this whole thing will turn around.
Coming with the monkey hands, son. Hanging off the rim with it, son. Hey, he was coming so clean with it, though. What they gon' say? What they gon' say when you go to church? What they gon' say when you gone? Your birds flying south with poop, two gone. Unload 2 clips and take your bricks. You trap you like some rats, I'm in the black and the Yukon. If one cat move, he getting fried with heat. You can see the rest of your homies lonely on the floor bleeding. Ooh Lord, gonna need medical resuscitation, cause I'm blasting with no hesitation. Blood like menstruation, I'll blaze your camp even though I'm on probation. Wear Rockport flip-flops, pop collars, but I still let the clip pop. Don't take this shit hip-hop platforms, then let them shits tick-tock, then watch your whole shit drop. House Hill making business deals, now you see me in the dirt shop, but that's goodwill. After you're dead, a hole in your head, you think it's good getting killed. Now that shit talk. Don't talk to me, boy.
Say they dead, he gone, his head got blown. Lit up like a phone for the bread and stones. That nigga dead cause that nigga snitching. He feed feds the recipe in my kitchen. When I first heard that, my words exact. I want this rat on his back, don't cut him no slack. First get the crack in the stacks. After that, I wanna see number of brains on the mat. Flames from the gap, it was time to get gangsta on this cat. Every time his name mentioned, it's a fact. This nigga ain't stand a rack. Refrain from the gap, ain't too much to say about that.
What they gon' say when you're dead and gone? I said, what they gon' say when you're dead and gone? What they gon' say when you're dead and gone? I said, what they gon' say when you're dead and gone? What they gon' say when you're dead and gone? I said, what they gon' say when you're dead and gone? And gone.
I ain't the one to step on. Itching your chest, get your left in the pond. I'm the king, it's my quest to be the Don. I'ma never leave this bone unless I'm dead. No longer breathing and gone. Niggas missing me, talking about you sleeping too long. Hollering about their people and how they wish they was home. But gotta move on, prepare for the future and leave the rest of the song. Cause these niggas will kill you. Nigga, you ain't kill proof, will kill Bill too. And put it on film too. And get the camera for the still proof. Nigga, that's real proof. Cause when the chopper out, niggas will spook. So you better keep it real, dude. Cause the last thing I remember is them niggas killed you. Yeah, nigga.
What they gon' say when you're dead and gone? I said, what they gon' say when you're dead and gone? What they gon' say when you're dead and gone? I said, what they gon' say when you're dead and gone? What they gon' say when you're dead and gone? I said, what they gon' say when you're dead and gone? What they gon' say when you're dead and gone? I said, what they gon' say? What they gon' say when you're in that box? No shoes on, chillin' in them white ass socks. It's best said that you was best dead. Finally close your mouth, you got your brains blown out. Reality is harsh, left that ass on the march. But the funeral home, do some good work, huh? Some niggas looking at you laughing, top blown off, swollen stomach, moving from the fucking baggage. Some think you was a cause they drill fucked him, left the broom handle in his ass in. Special mercenary tactics, for those seen it on the news, to them it was tragic. Straight up fucking madness. The sadness, you gone before poo gone. Shoot long, heat like Tucson. Cashing cats in like a coupon. Now who gone? What they gon' say when you gone?